Hi, can everybody hear me? Can you guys hear me? Okay, good. Thanks. I just wanted to make sure. Let's see. And slideshow. Okay. Um, all right. I'm just going to wait a few minutes for people to get here. And so we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. This one is going to be a little bit longer of a workshop tonight to go through the PT. So just so you guys can plan on it, just as a heads up, I do block out. I always block 3 hours for the workshops, but we don't always use that. So just, I mean, I know you guys have probably noticed that, or you all have noticed that with the last couple, but just wanted to kind of make that more explicit comment. That's the maximum we'll use, but and I just have to do that for blocking out time. But anyways, I don't know if you can see the message that I sent earlier before you've joined, but for those of you that have just joined, the materials that we're going to use are posted to the Twin page. They're in the folder for the PT class, which is obviously the workshop that we're doing tonight. You won't need them right away. I've modified the PowerPoint a tiny bit since that one has been posted. So I'll repost it, but I mean substantively it's exactly the same. I just reorganized like 2 slides. So just so you all know that. And just so you guys can see me and so I don't feel like I'm talking into the universe or of nothing, but I'm at home doing it tonight, so I hope you don't see my dog join in. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. 6:02. People will join in. So I'm going to talk about the performance test tonight. You guys know, feel free to type questions at the bottom. I look at it quite a bit. Um, if you have a question, definitely feel free. I'm going to turn off the video cam. I don't think you need to see me. I'd rather have you focus on the slides, but it's there. So just so you know. Um, all right. So the PT. So first, we're going to talk about just some basics. So it's a closed universe where you're given a task or several tasks to complete, and you have to do it within 90 minutes. Um, Generally speaking, it's where you have to do one task. On the old California 3-hour PTs, they used to have you do, there were several that required you to do multiple tasks. It's less common for you to have to do multiple tasks with the 90-minute PTs, but it's still something that's possible. You will, if you guys have questions or you want to see examples of any PTs where you have to do multiple things, a good one to look at is Williams v. A1. I think that one is publicly available. Also, just so you all know, in the on the Twin page, we have posted a whole bunch of performance tests that are freely available from the National Conference of Bar Examiners, which is the group that puts on or they're the ones that write and publish both the MBE and the performance tests. And also, if you're taking a UBE, it's administered by them as well. So because you've taken the performance test class, if you have seen a bunch of the PTs already from that your bar prep company is giving you, there are additional ones that we have posted. If you're taking the bar again and you want just a bigger variety of PTs to choose from, they're also in there. So you have a variety. There's probably 15 or 20 of them in there. There's a good amount. In terms of practicing performance tests, I think it's a really good idea to practice at least one performance test a week. It's something that, even though, some people say that they don't really practice them because you can't really, some people will say, well, it's not like the law. You're not going to, every single one is different. It's a skill. Doing a performance test is really, they're testing you on a wide variety of different skills. And improving on those skills is really important. And getting used to doing a performance test and completing it within the 90-minute time window is also very important. So those are just kind of my general comments on performance tests. I love PTs. I absolutely love them. It's, I think, really your opportunity to really shine. If you can kill a PT, the PT counts for double. It counts for as much as 2 essays. So if you can get like a 75 or an 80 on a PT, that means it can, if you get that essay where you just don't know what to do, where it's just the one that everybody has an essay that's just terrible. For me, it was essay number 1 when I took the bar. At least I think it was terrible. But I just saw it and I panicked because it was pure remedies and it was a weird remedies question. So, knowing that you can do well on a PT gives you a level of comfort, I think, throughout the day. So it can help to kind of keep you calm. So you have one. If you're taking California, if you're taking a UBE, you'll have 2 performance tests you complete in the afternoon. You complete the PT during a 3.5-hour block in the afternoon. So you do 2 essays and then a performance test, and you're responsible for managing your own time. And time management really is critical. You absolutely need to spend, on every essay, you need to spend an hour. No more, no less. On the PT, you need to spend 90 minutes, no more, no less. It's really critical that you don't borrow any time. And if you find yourself finishing an essay, it's incredibly, incredibly rare where you're going to finish an essay and have a bunch of extra time. If you do, that means you're missing issues. So you need to go back to that essay and figure out what you're missing. Spend an hour on each essay and 90 minutes on the performance test. And that's it. It's tested so you know that you have the PT. It's given on Tuesday. So that'll be Tuesday. I think it's the 27th. So it'll be in the afternoon. So generally speaking, that starts around 1:30 or 1:30ish. Around 3 o'clock, 3:30, you'll be starting in on your performance test. And the reason I tell you that is because I think it's a good idea to practice it in the afternoon around that time. When you do them, because you want to see, what is it like after you're sort of exhausted for the day and then you have to do this 90-minute labor intensive task at that time. So it's tested on the first afternoon. It's the last thing, generally speaking, that you're going to do. A lot of people ask me if they, is it a good idea for them to start with the PT and then do the essays. You can move stuff around, and this is something that you all should toy around with a little bit. I always just think it's best for me. I think that or in my opinion, I think it's best to just do things in the order that you're given. And the reason I say that is because you have to do everything anyways. So if you spend any time, looking at one thing and then being like, okay, I don't want, this is remedies, I hate remedies, or this is BA, I hate BA, I don't want to do that. You're just wasting a little bit of time. So ideally you want to just do the tasks. And the reason I say it in particular with the PT, some people will want to, if they get the PT, and you'll want to just be like, oh, let me just get this one extra argument in this last bit, and I think it's going to be really good. It's going to help me. Usually, it's not really not going to make a difference. And the danger is that you will go over time, and you'll eat into your time for your essays. So I just think it's good to do the things as they're given to you, but that's something that you can mess around with. So say like you always like to do the performance test first. I think then you can, if just practice that way, make sure that you practice that way. So historically, every PT will receive a score ranging from 40 to 100, and 65 is usually the score needed to pass. This is the same as with the essays. I haven't seen a 65 being anything higher than 65. For the last few bar exam administrations, it's ranged from a 61 to about a 63. So that's passing. So if you can get, a 70, 75, 80 on the performance test, that's really going to boost your score. So so I absolutely emphasize practicing performance tests quite a bit. And this is true with essays as well. If you only get a 0 or lower than a 40 if you literally just didn't do it. And if there is something that you don't get to, if you just don't get to an essay or you don't get to a PT, that's an automatic fail. They will consider you as having not completed the exam, and it's an automatic fail. So there's that as well. So a score ranging, so a 40 is really easy to get. A 40 is just like you literally write like memorandum, to, from, and you just do a little bit. You barely write anything. That gets you a 40, and then it's ratcheting up your score from 40 to 45. That's pretty simple, but 45 to 50, 55 to 60, and so on. Like that gets incrementally more difficult. So moving from a 60 to a 65 requires some serious skill. But not that it's not doable. It's totally doable. The PTs, you just have to rely on your skill, that you've been trained throughout law school in terms of writing. It harkens back to your first year legal writing experience. So and also CIFRO too, I guess, to an extent. So that's kind of the basics of the performance test. So what does it test? So a few things. So it can test PR. I don't know why I put that first. That's just something it can test. If you see, the bar examiners will often include some sort of PR, in a PT. But it really tests your analytical skills, your legal analysis and reasoning. That's really number one. So it's not testing your substantive knowledge of the law like the MBE and the essays are. It's testing, how well can you decipher a case? Can you extract rules? Can you analogize and distinguish precedent, your cases, your case facts to precedent cases? So fact-focused skills, your factual analysis. So, how good are you at identifying which facts are relevant and which facts are not? At selecting, the pertinent facts, at not getting bogged down in facts that are just totally irrelevant. So they're looking at that as well. Your problem solving abilities, so your ability to recognize a problem, to see that there is one, and then also provide a resolution. So this is like, if you see there's a few PTs where part of your job is to, as attorneys, our job is to advise. So you're providing a resolution, you're answering a question, and then you're also, advising your client on the best course of action, or advising the court as to what it must do, in a very polite and deferential manner. Your ability to develop an action plan. So sometimes that's where it's the same sort of, same as, advising your client. So your client might, if you're writing an opinion letter to your client, they might have asked you a few questions, and at the end, in your conclusion, you're going to give them a plan of action. Sometimes you'll also be told you'll be told that your client wants to know, okay, well, if we need additional information, tell me how, what information we need to get and how we are supposed to do it. So you have to develop an action plan that way. It also really tests your ability to communicate. So can you communicate effectively? Like, this is really what, your time in law school and legal writing has trained you to do. You're synthesizing rules, you're applying those rules to a new set of facts. And how do you communicate to a client? Can you adopt the proper tone? Do you write in a professional manner? Are you properly advising your client? Are you thinking of, issues? Maybe your client hasn't actually asked you something, but you might tell your client, okay, well, this is something that you might also want to keep in mind. Or if your client's an attorney, they've asked you several questions, and then you might say, hey, I know that you didn't ask me this, but there's also this other issue. You want to make sure that you don't get caught up in that. If you see something and the bar examiners don't explicitly tell you not to address it, like, you can get some extra points there. Sometimes, rarely, the bar examiners will ask you to effectuate a legal transaction. So they might ask you to draft a will. I will talk about that in the worst case scenario workshop. If you're told to effectuate a legal transaction, you might be drafting components of a contract. You might be drafting a settlement agreement. You might be, creating a discovery plan. There's all of these, which isn't technically a legal transaction, but it's sort of those weird assignments that can be one of those weird assignments that can come up. So that's, your ability to effectuate a legal transaction. We'll talk about that. I think that is somewhat unlikely for California, but you should definitely be prepared for something, weird, just in case. So somebody asked, how many pages of words should you aim for during a PT? It's really just like everything else. It's just like an essay. So you're going to spend about 45 minutes writing, like actually writing. You're going to spend about half your time planning, and then half your time actually writing. So there isn't really there's not like a hard and fast rule, but I always just say, okay, well, if you spend 45 minutes writing and you're an average typist, so, 40 words a minute, which is like fairly average, then you should be able to write about 1,600 pages, or 1,600 words, not pages, geez. That being said, though, like, I've seen a lot of essays coming in, a lot of essays and performance tests coming in, and the scores that I'm seeing when they're passing, I've seen plenty that come in around 1,200 words. So don't think that, the word count is an end all be all. It's absolutely not. I've seen essays that have gotten a score of an 80 that are 800 words. So there isn't a hard and fast rule, but some people just sort of like that guideline. Yeah. So does that answer your question, Christina? Okay. All right. So what is a PT test? All right. So some common performance test tasks. So generally speaking, there's so when I list these out, these are the objective ones, and I list the more common ones at the top. So the most common things are a legal memo, an advice letter to a client. Those are really the two most common tasks that are objective. So you have a supervising attorney, they say, please prepare a memo on these issues. There you have to write objectively. And this is one of the most important things. Writing objectively, when they tell you to write persuasively or vice versa, is a huge, fatal error. So you can't do that. So you've got to pay close attention. Also, just a little side note, something to note. Sometimes you will be asked to write a memo, but they'll ask you to write a persuasive memo. So you have to really pay close attention to the task memo, because that is what is telling you what you have to do. The task memo is like the holy grail in the PT. That is a thing that you absolutely have to pay attention to. Everything in there is important, and you always want to keep that at the forefront of your mind. So that's where you will know what you need to do. That's where where you have a supervising attorney giving you a task and asking you to do something. So they might be asking you to write a memo. They might be asking you to write an advice letter. They could also be asking you to write an affidavit or a declaration. They could ask you to write jury instructions, or they can ask you to write a memo to a judge or a bench memo. So those are all of the more common PT tasks, but really the most common are the top two there. This is what's been given since California went to the 90 minutes. They've done a brief, they've done a letter to opposing counsel, which is persuasive. They've done just a regular memo as well. So they've been, sort of the common tasks. So, you want to make sure that that's what you're practicing. And in the worst case scenario workshop, we'll go over some of the other ones. And I think it's a really good idea for you all to practice doing some of the like ones that you would feel like, oh my God, if I got that on the actual exam, I'd be screwed. It's important to practice that, but you want to be most familiar with the common tasks. So the most common persuasive tasks, you'll be asked to do a memorandum of points and authorities. You might be asked to do a brief in support of a motion. There can also be, it's actually down further on the list. So a demand letter or a letter to opposing counsel, that's really common also. So really it's, knowing how to write a letter, knowing how to write a brief. How do you set it up? Like, how do you make it look like what we as lawyers do when I'm preparing a document? Like, what does that look like? A trial brief or an appellate brief, those first four are really saying like essentially the same thing. It's a court document that is a persuasive court document. It's rare, but it can happen. An opening statement or a closing statement. It really should say opening statement, closing argument. Those are less common, but they've happened a few times. Again, I don't really expect that stuff to come up, but you got to be prepared for everything. And the good thing is, I'm going to give you some templates, or they're already posted to the Twin page. But it's basically all the same. And like the thing that's really important to see is that when you do performance tasks, the setup is largely the same. Like the main big components, the macro organization of it is essentially the same no matter what it is. So even if you're writing a brief, if you're doing an opening statement or a closing argument, so even if you get one of those scary tasks there that most people are scared of, it's usually not that bad. It truly is just like doing anything else. Any questions so far? Okay, cool. All right. And then you'll also have, these are objective and persuasive tasks. So this is where you'll be given, and they don't do these as often, but this is where you'll be given something that is, you'll have to do something that's objective and something that's persuasive. So it's two tasks in one. So a theory of the case memo, that's where you have to like write, okay, objectively, tell about the case. So this is probably an internal document. And then you'll also do a persuasive document that's like arguing the case. A case plan, a position paper, or a legal brief. So sometimes it's just objective and persuasive because you have to do something that is objective, like a statement of facts, it's objective, and then you're writing something that's persuasive. So those are some objective and persuasive combos. So you'll see some of those throughout as well. All right. So now let's talk about the components of a PT. So first you have an instruction sheet. You should all look at one of the most recent California bar exam administrations and look at the instruction sheets and read it. I think it's like instruction 2, where it tells you you're in the fictional state of Colombia. It's one of the United States, and I think they'll tell you that you're part of like the 14th or 15th judicial district. So it's this whole made up state. So you're going to look for the jurisdiction. It is very rare. Like, I don't think that they've really done this. I think maybe in a UBE, rarely, but they'll tell you the allocation of points. They're really not going to tell you that. So read the instruction sheet basically once. When you're in the real exam, you want to just double check, make sure it's the same. And then it doesn't matter. The next thing though is the task memo. So the task memo is by far it's like I said, this is your holy grail. It's by far the most important thing that you have in your in the packet. So the task memo, it's part of the file. So when you get your here, I'm going to turn the screen on so you can see me. So when you get your let me do this. When you guys get your packet, so what you're going to get is in the afternoon, it's going to have you're going to have an envelope, and in the envelope there is going to be your essays and your performance test materials. You need to pull everything out and make sure that you have everything for the performance test. So you have 2 booklets, 2 little packets, and one is the file and one is the library. So they're separate documents or separate little packets, and you just make sure that you have both. I had someone before who hers was stuck on the last bar. Her library was stuck inside. It was just like stuck to the envelope. So she thought she didn't have one for some reason. You will always have a file in a library. And when you open the file, the first thing you'll see is the instruction sheet. And the second thing that you'll see is the task memo. So it says memorandum at the top. If you guys want to refer to this, let me do this. If you go to the Twen page, sorry, you guys get to see all my fun things that I have open. If you go to the Twen page and open the Phoenix V biogenesis performance test, so first of all, here's the instruction page. And you'll see here, yeah, it's number 2. There's the fictional state of Colombia, one of the United States. And then you have the file. So that's actually part of the file. So then you have the, let me download it actually. Then you have the task memo. So it will look something like this. Oops. Sorry, guys. It will look basically like this. The font is a little bit different, but it says memorandum at the top. Usually it'll have a law firm. It'll have a law firm something or other on it, like name and address and all of that. It'll have to, from, date, and the date will be the date. It'll be February 27th. And it'll have the subject, which will probably be the case name that you're dealing with. And then this is your task memo. So you guys can see my screen, right? So in this area, I'm going to turn that off. This is telling you, like, this gives you what you need to know in order, like, what do you need to do? So you need to pay very close attention to the task memo. You need to pay very close attention to the task memo. So that's what one looks like. And in California, the reason I'm saying in California, this one is, a lot of what we use are ones from the UBE, because they've been doing the 90-minute PT for a long time. But California, they just do it in a slightly different font, but they're essentially the same. Any questions about that? I'm assuming not. You guys will type it. Just type it. If you have a question, just ask as we go. So that's what a task memo looks like. Sometimes you're going to have a format memo. Oftentimes, the format memo, if your task is to write something persuasive, that's generally speaking when you're going to have a format memo. You can have one for any task, but a format memo is essentially what it is. Like if you have to write a brief, they'll say, the task memo will say, please see our in-house memo regarding drafting of persuasive briefs. So it will tell you that. And then generally speaking, if that's what you're told to do, they just basically say, use headings that incorporate both the facts and the law. They'll give you an example of a good one and an example of a bad one. You'll see this. You will see this with a lot of PTs you practice. So you'll just want to identify one, read it. Most of them are pretty similar though. Then you'll also have, then you have the file, which contains the instruction sheet, the task memo. And then you have your file, which is like your client documents, essentially. So it can consist of a lot of different things. Newspaper article, like a fake newspaper article. It can contain a transcript. It can contain an interview transcript, a court transcript. It might contain something that the opposing side has written. So it's a whole host of different things, and you guys will all see this as you do practice. And then you have the library. So the library is going to contain some case law. There you will always have cases, and sometimes you will also have some statutes as well. Or you might have some secondary authority. You might have a treatise on something or an excerpt from a treatise. So those are the different components of a PT. This should all be a lot of review, but I just like to go over it as a refresher. Okay. So you get your task memo when you read it. If they tell you to write an objective memo, and so these next several slides, they're going to go over what the setup looks like. So as soon as you read the task memo, if you see, okay, they tell me to write an objective memo, or they tell me to write a brief, like what do I need to do? Actually, let me show you. So for the one that we're going to use to work with tonight, I actually have some samples just of like skeletal outlines, and they're posted to Twen. I think it just says like common setups or something like that, but it's in the Twen. They're posted to Twen, and it just shows you like the skeletal outline of what an objective memo looks like, what a brief looks like, what a letter looks like. I think we even have one for opening statement and closing argument. So if you're told to write an objective memo, you do a caption, which will usually mirror essentially the task memo caption. You have an instruction or introduction. They're rarely going to tell you to omit it, but sometimes they do. And you want it to be brief. Essentially, with the introduction, what you are doing is like literally every single time I write one, I basically regurgitate what they told me to do in the task memo. So, if the task memo says, okay, please prepare a brief on or a memo dealing with issue 1, 2, 3, that analyzes issues 1, 2, and 3. I will literally say, below, please find my analysis of issue 1, 2, 3. And that's it. So you're basically, what you're doing, the reason for doing that is you're telling the grader that you're like, hey, I'm doing what you told me to do, because following instructions is one of the most important things. So that's your introduction, and it's, you really, like, you don't have to be creative. You just literally can regurgitate what they told you to do. This is not the time to, try to write perfectly. So yeah, that's your introduction. You include a statement of facts only if you're asked to include it. It's really like, oftentimes you're told not to, you're explicitly told not to. You can do it if you have extra time and they haven't asked you to do it and they haven't told you not to, but usually, like, if you have extra time, then you've missed something else. But what you want to do if you're writing a statement of facts, you include the legally significant facts. Usually you can, for the statement of facts, you can just pull, well, you can primarily pull from the task memo. That every fact in the task memo is incredibly important. They're giving you those facts because they're telling you those because those are really like the legally significant facts. You'll probably pull some facts in the file as well. But, I will, if I'm told to write a statement of facts, I'll usually write something brief just based on the task memo. You want to write in a neutral tone, and you don't want to exceed 2 to 3 paragraphs. You keep it brief. Especially if you're writing an objective memo, you are writing objectively, so you have to include bad facts. All right, so you have a statement of facts, and then you have your analysis or your discussion. You can call it either one. And so usually what I'll do is I'll have an introduction on a memo, and it'll be Roman numeral 1 introduction, and I'll have my roadmap. Roman numeral 2, if I'm including a statement of facts, will be statement of facts. Roman numeral 3 would be analysis or discussion, and Roman numeral 4 would be conclusion. And my conclusion is basically going to outline what I've discussed in a brief manner. Any questions about that? So that's an objective memo. It's really common, and you guys all did this in first year legal writing. Hopefully, if you've worked, you've done a little bit of this too. All right. So next thing, letter to a client. Letter to a client is, generally speaking, objective. So this is at the very top. So just like in the memo, we do the caption, and a letter to a client, you do address, you do yours, you do the client's address, you do the date, the case name, and then you say, dear client, and you'll put the client's name, and in a formal way. So you'll address them as Mr. or Ms. Then it's the same thing. You have introduction, but you don't label it. Then you have analysis or discussion and conclusion. So, and then at the end, you just sign it, sincerely applicant. And you write applicant. You don't put your name, because that would be a huge confidentiality breach. So in your introduction, you say, it has been a pleasure. You're writing in a very formal manner. Your tone is really important, and they do care about that. You have to keep in mind that the people that grade this aren't usually like fresh new attorneys. Sometimes they are. It's a mix, but a lot of them are people that are, been practicing for a long time, and they want to see a high level of professionalism. So you'll say, it has been a pleasure researching this matter for you in response to your question about, and you'll literally regurgitate what the question was from the task memo. Please see my analysis below. And then you're writing a roadmap in there. And then in the analysis or discussion, you're going to use point headings to identify every issue and sub-issue that you're addressing. Usually, we'll talk about where you get that organization. We'll talk about that later. And then your conclusion. Give an overall conclusion. And so, state what, what you said, and then provide some specific recommendation. You say, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. Generally speaking, as soon as I read the task memo and I know what I'm doing, I'm in my computer and I'm typing. I do my setup, and I write my introduction, and I usually write my conclusion at the same time. We'll talk about the reasons why in a little bit, but that's what you want to do. Letter to opposing counsel. So it's really similar to a letter to a client. Again, you have the same stuff at the top, the address of yours and opposing counsel, date, and dear, Mr. Smith or Ms. Smith, whatever it is. A letter to opposing counsel is persuasive. So it is persuasive. So you want to have that tone. And it's a bit more assertive, as you can imagine. But without being, aggressive or rude or anything, you still, like, the practice of law is still very, we like to think that it's cordial to an extent. Assertive, but still professional. So introduction, you introduce yourself and who you represent and the purpose of the letter. So you say, dear Mr. Smith, my name is applicant. I represent Ms. Smith. And the purpose of this letter is to ask, or, is to seek, is to seek the settlement of X. And you'll just state what you're seeking, basically. If you have time and you're instructed not to omit, then you can include some facts in here, but I really don't include the statement of facts, essentially, unless I'm told to do so. You're writing in a persuasive tone, and you don't want to exceed, if you're including facts, you don't want to exceed a few paragraphs. Then you have your argument. You can label it argument. So, label that. So that would be, Roman numeral argument, and then state, you have point headings below that. Make sure that you're addressing, and I'll talk about this later, but you always want to be addressing counter arguments in every single PT. And then your conclusion, restate what you want from opposing counsel. You just say, based on the foregoing, your client, my client is entitled to $475 million based on your client's negligence, whatever it is. And then sincerely, applicant. If you have to write a brief. So first of all, people are often confused as to, like, what do I put at the top? At the very top, you write plaintiff's brief, or you put the case name, and you say plaintiff's brief in support of, and then whatever it is that you're actually writing. And then you have Roman numerals, introduction. It's really going to be introduction, argument, conclusion. Those are really like the three Roman numeral headings you're almost always going to have: introduction, an argument or analysis, and conclusion. You're rarely going to include, I can't even think of a performance test where you include the procedural history. And then sometimes you're told to include a statement of facts. You're often told to it shouldn't say admit, it should say omit. But you might be told to admit to a stipulated statement of facts. That's one that happens. So then you have your argument, you have argument headings. And generally speaking, if you're doing this, you will often have a format memo, and you have to comply with the formatting they tell you to do, which is usually going to be, state, it might be, Ms. Vargas is committed timber trespass, because she went on Mr. Monte's property and cut down trees. So you have to have essentially a conclusion with facts and law, and that's your heading. So you want to you want to have headings like that, and then have your conclusion. And your conclusion in a brief or something you're submitting to the court is asking the court to do something. So you're going to say, for the foregoing reasons, we respectfully request, or plaintiff respectfully requests that the court grant, whatever they're asking for. Any questions so far? I'm just going to assume no, unless people pipe up with questions. Okay. All right. Organization. So and what I'm talking about here, I'll turn the camera on so you can see me. So what I'm talking about here is really in the meat of your performance test. So it's in the analysis, or it's in the argument section. So this is what I'm talking about, is how do you organize, like, the substance of the performance task. So do you organize it? And there's different ways you can organize it. So you do it either by legal issue, which, if it's not one of the others, it's by legal issue, or issue that the client is asked, by client question, by argument. Sometimes you'll be responding to another person's, like, to another brief. So you might be doing it by argument or by law. So by law is just, if you don't have certain things laid out for you, then it's just by law, and you're and that is something you're going to pull from the library. So this is what I'm talking about, the substance of the performance test. So it's what is under the analysis or argument header. Okay. so you organize by issue. So if the task memo just tells you, so this is why it's so important. Your task memo is often going to tell you how to organize. So you really want to look for that. So you organize by issue when the task memo provides you with certain issues to address, or there are clear issues raised by the file. So when there are clear issues raised by the file, that's often you want to, if you see like a transcript or an interview with a client, the transcript might list out particular issues that the client has brought up or the supervising attorney has raised. So you'll see a list of questions, a list of issues. You organize by client question if the task memo explicitly or implicitly instructs you to do so. So it might tell you that the client has 3 specific questions that they want answered. The likelihood then, so if that's the case, is that under your Roman numeral with argument or analysis, you're going to have 3 Roman numerals, or you're going to have, A, B, and C, and A is, question 1, B is question 2, C is question 3. So you're going to match up your headings with those client questions. The task memo might reference another document in the file that actually contains specific questions. So it might say, the task memo might actually tell you that if you want to, or please refer to the interview with the client where they list several questions that we need to address. So the tip here is that if they tell you that there is a document in the task memo, if it references another document, you often need to just go straight to that document. That's the next thing you should read. Because really, like on a performance test, goal number one of the performance test is to figure out, okay, what document am I creating? What's the tone? And what is my big picture? Like my macro setup? Is it a memo? Is it a letter? What is it? Then after that, the next thing you have to figure out is, okay, then what is my organization within the argument or analysis section? So that's where we're at now, is we figured out the big picture setup, and now we're figuring out the next thing. So within that, what are my point A, point B, and point C headings in my analysis or argument section? So if you're given that either in the task memo or some other document, like that is the next thing that you want to do before you get to writing rules, writing case explanations, etc. Does that make sense? I'm assuming yes. Organized by argument. So often, the task memo might tell you to do something if you're drafting a persuasive task, so a memorandum of points and authorities or a letter to opposing counsel. You're going to probably organize by argument. If the task memo it explicitly instructs you to set forth your client's best arguments, then you're organizing by argument. If you are told to respond to arguments made by opposing counsel, i.e., you have to prepare a response to a brief or to a motion that opposing counsel made. So what you're going to do is you're then going to take the arguments that opposing counsel made, and you're going to just flip them. If you're writing persuasively, you'll flip them. If you're writing objectively, then you'll just list out those arguments and respond to them below. So here's some examples. So, and I'll give you guys just a second to read these, but the first one here, please prepare a letter to opposing counsel that persuasively explains that our clients should get their father's entire estate because A, the bequest to Claude's first wife Irene is no longer effective, and B, the bequest to Maxine is invalid, and C, the marriage to Maxine should be annulled because of Claude's incapacity. So do you guys want me to type out what this would then look like? Would that help you? I can just type it out in Word. I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So if we're doing that, so if it's a letter to opposing counsel, I'm going to have, dear Mr. Smith, and I would have my little introductory thing here, and then it would be one analysis or discussion. Actually, I'll leave it as discussion. And it's point A. If I look at this, point A, and I'm just literally going to type these out. So, bequest to Claude's first wife, Irene, is no longer effective. And you're going to have typos, and it's not a big deal. perfection is the enemy of completion. You have to remember that the entire time. The bequest to Maxine is invalid. And C, the marriage to Maxine should be annulled because of Claude's incapacity. Sincerely, applicant. So you would have up here, before you have Dear Mr. Miss Smith, you would have at your address, you would have opposing counsel address. You would have the case name. So if this is Gross v. Baker, and you would have the date about that. So it's February 27th, 2018. So this is basically what this would look like. And then you would have, if they tell you to organize by argument, so we're in this macro section, or we're in this in the discussion section, we are including just point A, point B, point C, and those are our headings. And again, you have then you have the next one. Reddick has filed the motion in federal district court with a supporting memorandum of points and authorities, asking the court to dismiss or stay our action for a permanent injunction. Please draft a memorandum of points and authorities in opposition to Reddick's motion. Present our best arguments and rebut each of Reddick's arguments, including any of his unsupported legal or factual assertions. So here they're telling you, they're not giving you the arguments, but they're telling you that you have to rebut each of Reddick's arguments. So there you may have figured out. You're probably going to go to Reddick's motion because your argument heading is just coming from that motion. You're just stating it in the opposite. So if you're doing by argument, your point headings should be persuasive. Any statement headings should usually, so your heading should include the argument of fact specific to your case from the file. And you might, when you're starting out, you might have to, put the argument in without the facts and then add in those facts later. And that's okay, as long as you remember to go in and later add those facts. So if you get another, if you're drafting a brief or a summary judgment motion or an opposition to a summary judgment motion, what you're doing is you're just taking those points that the opposing side made and you're just flipping them. So if you have this first statement in the opposing counsel points, they say the court should deny Belton's summary judgment motion. You're just going to flip that to there's a triable issue of material fact as to causation, or you're just going to, sorry, on the first one, you should say the court should grant Belton's summary judgment motion, right? So you just take that statement and make it the opposite and make sure that it's persuasive. For the second one, there was a triable issue of material fact as to causation based on negligent installation work at the Martinville powerhouse. You're going to just flip that to say there is no triable issue of material fact, etc. The next point heading, there is a triable issue of material fact as to causation based on negligent installation work at the Collins powerhouse. You just flip that to there is no triable issue of material fact. So it's literally when you're organizing by argument and you have an opposing side's moving papers, you just take their headings and turn them, flip them to the opposite. Does that make sense? Any questions? Okay. All right. Organized by law. So you organize by law. It is really often, which often you're going to have like a combination. So what you're going to do is you're going to have, some client questions or something. And then you'll have within that, underneath your client question, your client headings, with, what the arguments are, you're going to have some legal headings below that. So the task memo might explicitly or implicitly tell you to do so. It might give you specific causes of action or defenses. So if they say, okay, analyze whether the client or opposing the defendant is liable for timber trespass, and if so, what level of damages are appropriate. So you might, and if there are single, double, and treble, your headings are going to be, defendant committed timber trespass, and then another heading is if you're writing persuasively, plaintiff is entitled to treble damages because defendant acted recklessly and maliciously with respect to cutting down plaintiff's trees. That's from a real performance test. And then below that, you're going to have, treble damages, double damages, and single damages. You're going to have, they will list it out in the task memo. And the task memo might tell you to evaluate each element, or they might actually just explicitly tell you to analyze the statute. So here's some examples. So apply the facts to the elements and assess the likelihood that the plaintiff will prevail on the merits of the claim. Another one, if we were to proceed to trial on this matter, do we have enough evidence to prove every element of each offense beyond a reasonable doubt? And then identify the factors the court will consider in deciding our motion to dismiss based on lack of PJ over the defendant. So those are some examples when they're giving you a specific claim, and then you're going to have the elements, like that's telling you your point headings are going to be based just on the elements. So when you organize by law, what you have to do is you have to determine what the causes of action are, the defenses. I mean, this is really like, it's very similar to writing an essay. So if it's a cause of action, then you list the elements below that, and then you're going to do, defenses after that, remedies. So it's very much like writing an essay. Step 2, determine what elements or factors are needed to establish each applicable cause of action, and then determine if they break down further into sub-elements or sub-factors. So this is pretty much like writing, a lot like writing an essay, because you organize by law. Okay, I'm going to go into PT grading criteria in a few minutes, but I'm going to just give you guys like a little 5-minute break. So let's just start a little bit longer than that. Just because it's a lot of information, I'm going to go into like the next phase, which is the grading criteria, in a few minutes. So let's come back. My clock says 6:48, so let's come back at 6:55. And I'm going to pause this for a minute. Okay, I'm back. All right. So now, the next thing that we're going to talk about is PT grading criteria. So what is going on when a bar examiner is looking at your performance test, and what can you do to make sure that you are successful on the performance test? So first, like absolutely by far, number one thing is following the instructions. The bar examiners told you what they want you to do, and they want to see if you're doing what you were told to do in the way you were told to do it. So, if you were told to write a memo and you write a brief, if you're told to write a memo and you write a letter, it's like that you just give them a really easy reason to fail you. So you've got to follow instructions. And this is why doing the introduction, where you're basically regurgitating what they told you to do, that's why it's really important to just have that introduction that that just shows, like you're saying, like, hey, grader, look, I'm doing exactly what you told me to do. So number 2, extracting and organizing the law. So, the next thing they're going to look at, okay, well, did you pull out the right rules and organize it in a logical manner? So if you don't organize well, and I've said this, a bunch, if you don't organize well, it's going to be hard for the grader to figure out what your points are. They might not see it. So if it's poorly organized and they can't see it, that's on you. Look, you can write the greatest performance test that has the most beautiful analysis, but if they can't like easily find your analysis, that gives them a reason to fail you, and you're done. So extracting the law, so you've got to pull out, so the content. Are you pulling out the right rules? Are you using the right cases where you need to? Are you communicating effectively with the correct tone? Are you using, how strong is your analysis? Are you comparing like facts to like facts? Are you explicitly drawing out those comparisons, or are you requiring the person that's grading it to do that, to make those connections? So extracting and organizing the law, and then applying the law to the relevant facts. So in your analysis section, so this ties into content. This is you identifying the rule, and then saying, analogizing to or distinguishing from the precedent cases, or just doing a straight up applying the law to the facts. You don't always do a comparison. Sometimes it's something that's very simple, and you'll see this in the PT that we're going to look at tonight. And then also managing your time. So I'll talk about that in a second. So you've got to manage your time. You have to finish the performance test. If you don't finish it, and I mean finish it like getting down, answering all of the questions. You might not finish it in the way that you would like to finish it. That's like totally fair. But generally speaking, it's like, did you get to the points that you needed to hit? And did you answer the questions? So, all right, on that note, we're going to talk about some common and fatal errors. So not finishing is number one. If you don't finish, they know really that you didn't manage your time well, or you didn't understand what was going on. So they give you a task that can be done. If you know what you're doing, you can finish it in 90 minutes. Misunderstanding the task memo. So like I said, the task memo is the most important document that you have. You need to make sure that you are, you understand what it is telling you to do, that you're writing in the proper tone, and that you are creating the proper product. So when you get the task memo, you want to identify what tone. Am I writing objectively or persuasively? You want to know, okay, who's my audience? Am I writing to a client? If you're writing to a client, you need to write kind of in layman's terms. Your clients are considered not sophisticated, like lawyers are sophisticated. So that's important. And then what product are you creating? Are you writing a letter, a brief, a memo? What are you creating? So you need to, that information you get from the task memo. If you misunderstand that, that's a massive error. And it's not one that people make all that often. It's something that people do if they don't practice PTs very much. But that's why it's important for you to practice, is so that you don't have that issue. So if you're missing major rules, or you have the incorrect structure based on of the law, that goes back to organizing it well. Do you know what you're doing? Usually that goes into basically like your understanding of the problem at hand. So incorrect structure and missing rules kind of go hand in hand. If you missed out like a big issue they asked you to analyze, and it's because you didn't see it for some reason, then that is somewhat common, and that can be fatal. So a misunderstanding, the reason that's in part is common is because people don't practice performance tests. I cannot tell you how many times people have said, or I've come across people that are like, yeah, I didn't practice PTs. I just did it when, during the bar. Like, that's crazy. And I doubt, you guys are here in this workshop, so you're probably not the ones that are going to be doing that. But also sometimes, like, some people panic a little bit on the PTs. And that's what often will lead to misunderstanding the task memo, is because you're not fully you're really not fully thinking through the problem. So that's when that can happen. So you want to just always, if you find yourself a little bit panicked or freaked out, you want to take a deep breath, pause. Like, you might get up, have a drink of water, like splash water in your face even. I did that. And then make sure that you understand what's being asked of you. And then number 0.5 there is reading everything. The bar examiners give you too much information. They give you more than, if you spend time like really reading everything in depth, that's going to be a problem. You're going to spend way too much time. If you really spend time, like really what that is spending a bunch of time reading all of the facts of precedent cases, like whatever's in the library. You don't really have time for that. You can give it a skim and then get into the analysis of the cases, but don't sit there and get really deep into the facts that are set up in the beginning of the cases. Does that make sense? Okay. So don't read everything, because that is going to just set you up. That's going to be usually a big time suck, and you have to be really cognizant of your time. And that's also why it's really important. So on that note, time management, it's critical. So the performance test, one of the skills that they're testing is your ability to effectively deal with the materials and complete the task within the allotted time. It can be done. It absolutely can be done. But they purposely give you more than you can read to make sure you find what is important. So they want, one of the things they're testing you on is, can you discern what is important from what is not? So here's how you manage your time. So reading and planning is 45 minutes, actual writing, like in depth, and you kind of go back and forth between these things, and you will all want to practice doing this quite a bit, so that some people will just do, pre-write for the full 45 minutes and plan their answer for 45 minutes. I kind of go back and forth. Like, I read the task memo and I do my setup, and then I go back to it, and I'm kind of going back and forth. Not everybody can do that. So you need to practice doing, PTs multiple different ways. So where you're in person, and then also doing it, I'm sorry, not in person. Where you're doing it, where you just plan everything in advance and literally don't type anything. Or if you say, okay, task memo, and then you go and you do the setup for the memo, or the letter, or whatever it is that you're writing. And then you might see, you might get your organization, and then, you type that. And when you're doing that, then you're in the library and you're reading, and then you might see which rules you need. Like I would go, like for me, I go in and type those things in, and I'll do my case explanation as well. So you need to kind of mess around and give yourself time and see what works for you. Like how are you most effective? Does that make sense? I'm assuming yes, but okay, cool. So reading and planning. So out of the time that you have, you're reading and planning for 45 minutes. You're writing really for 40 minutes, and like really just writing and not writing to pause and think. It's writing like you know what you are trying to say. And then proofreading 5 minutes. So that's also really important. I think the way that your product looks is probably the most important on the performance test. So you want to make sure that you have the proper setup. You want to make sure you have an introduction and a conclusion. You want to make sure that you give the appearance of completion. Complete it. You want to complete it, and you want it to look complete. So time management is absolutely critical, and I think that's why it does require like you could say every Tuesday afternoon you're going to write a PT, because that's what you're going to do. So that way, when it comes to the actual bar exam, Tuesday at 3:30, you're writing a PT. Because that way it's just, second nature, it's habit. You expect that, and you expect your brain to be functioning in that mode every Tuesday afternoon. So that's how you want to manage your time. All right, this is the approach. So you want to read and outline the task memo. So that's when I say outlining it, you're identifying who is your client, what is the tone, what are you preparing? And then you skim the file. So you go through the file and you just skim it. So a skim is truly where you just read the first line of what you have, and you're just like looking at it to see if stuff jumps off the page. So you skim the file. At that time, I also will make a note as to what I have in the file, and I'll write it in the top left-hand corner. So I'll actually grab my performance test and show you this. So you skim the file. That just takes a few minutes. And then you skim the library. So when you're skimming the library, you're looking at, seeing, do you have cases? Do you have statutes? So what is in there? And then I read the first line of each paragraph in a case. So I'll walk you through this. And then you determine the organizational setup. So is this a memo? And like I'll go in and I'll type the setup for that. Also I'll put those, and I'll write my introduction. I'll draft my little conclusion. I'll put, analysis or argument in there. And then I'm trying to figure out what goes, what are the headings under the analysis section. So I'm determining the organizational setup. And then I'm going to go through, generally speaking, I read the library before I read the file. I call them rule proofs. It's a case explanation where you're explaining what happened in a precedent case. So you're writing your actual rules, and then you're showing by explaining how a court applied that rule to the set of facts in one of your precedent cases. So I draft those, and then you go to the file for the facts. You go to the file for the facts, and then you're going through and you're extracting all of the relevant facts from your file. So how do you show that each element is met or not met? And then after that, you're really writing. So you're writing, you're actually drafting the analysis. So you're comparing to precedent cases, etc. So that's really that's your 40 minutes in there. And then you spend a few minutes at the end proofreading. So we're going to use that performance test. So Phoenix v. Biogenesis. So read and outline the task memo. So I'm going to give you guys, let's see, it's 7:06. I'm going to give you guys until 7:15 to do this. And I want you to just carefully, I'm going to give you more time than I think you need. I want you to identify your audience, identify the client and position, identify the task and tone, note any, if there are any special instructions, and if you get any organizational information. So I'm going to leave this slide up, but I'm going to give you guys until 7:15 to do this. So go ahead and start. And if you can't find it, it's on the Twin. Melissa, it's on the Twin page. It's in the PT folder. It's Phoenix v. Biogenesis. All right. So now let's go through this a little bit. Sorry, I'm sure that was more than enough time for all of you, I'm assuming. So I want to show you guys what my task memo looks like. So here's mine. And note that I mark it up. So I know you can't see the whole thing, but just so you guys get an idea, like that I'm marking it up pretty intensely. I also use these little plastic clips, and I put these at the beginning of every document. Use that. I also write in the top corner what it is. So I write task memo. Usually I would actually probably pull the task memo out, and I would have a little page like book holder, and I would have this on there. But I've noted, I've made notes throughout. So let's talk about what is on this one. So let's see. So your client is Amberg and Lewis. Your client is Amberg and Lewis. So what product you're creating is a memo that includes counter arguments. When I read the facts here, so some of the facts that I noted. So it says, yesterday we were retained by the law firm of Amberg and Lewis LLP. So that's our client, and they're a law firm. So I note that they're pretty sophisticated. On a motion for disqualification filed against it. So there's a motion that's been filed. So that tells me I'm probably going to want to look at that motion. And that's probably going to provide my organization. And then I get all these facts. So Amberg and Lewis represents Biogenesis Inc. When I see that, I'm thinking, okay, that client of Amberg and Lewis seems pretty sophisticated and also seems really complicated. In a breach of contract action brought by Phoenix Corporation seeking $80 million in damages. That's a lot of money, right? Like for most of us, like that's going to be like a fair amount of money. So this seems like a complicated case with a lot at stake. The lawsuit has been winding its way through the state court for almost 6 years. That's a long time. So 6 years is a long time. I know most cases take a few years. 6 is a fairly long time. So that tells me that a lot has happened in this case, that it's, if it's complicated, a lot's happened, 80 million in damages. So this is like a pretty high stakes case. Phoenix is represented by the Collins law firm. So, all right, I don't know what to do with that. There have been extensive discovery, motion practice, and several interlocutory appeals over the years. But the matter is now set for jury trial in a month and is expected to last 6 weeks. So it's close to trial. So trial is 4 weeks away. And it's expected to last 6 weeks, which is a fairly long amount of time for a trial. So that's coming up. And it's also like there's so much work that's been done on this case. So extensive discovery. There's been all sorts of motions filed. There's been interlocutory appeals. So that means there's been appeals that have happened. So this seems like a pretty contentious case as well. So now we have trial coming up. It's expected to last 6 weeks, and that's just a long trial. That means it's going to be pretty complex. 2 weeks ago, however, Phoenix filed a disqualification motion. So it's disqualifying Amberg and Lewis, after Amberg and Lewis obtained one of Phoenix's attorney-client privilege documents. So I'm like, all right, so it's a motion to disqualify this law firm on this particular case. So the reason I was paying attention to the facts here is because I'm thinking, okay, a disqualification motion, that's a pretty extreme remedy to get rid of the attorneys on this case after it's been going on for 6 years. It seems complicated. It seems highly technical, a lot at stake, a lot has happened. So if this law firm is disqualified, then that means that another firm has to substitute in and get up to speed when this trial is set for a month away. And it just seems, to get caught up on 6 years of litigation and complex, what I think is probably complex science because it's biogenesis, that seems like a really difficult task. And our client doesn't want that to happen. So I'm like, all right, cool. So that's what we're dealing with. So Phoenix filed a disqualification motion after Amberg and Lewis obtained one of Phoenix's attorney-client privilege documents. Okay. So, and that to me is telling the task force was telling me that this document is attorney-client privilege. Like we don't dispute that. And the document is a letter from Phoenix's former president to one of its attorneys. Yesterday, I interviewed Carol Ravel, an Amberg and Lewis partner. So this is a partner that's our client, basically. During the interview, I learned some background facts, and I also obtained a copy of the letter and Phoenix's brief in support of its DQ motion. So they're telling you these things, like they're basically summarizing what's in the file for you. So you have an interview transcript, you have a letter, and you have a brief. And then at the bottom, please prepare a memorandum evaluating the merits of Phoenix's argument for Amberg and Lewis's DQ, bringing to bear the applicable legal authorities and the relevant facts as described to me by Ms. Ravel. They tell you, do not draft a separate statement of facts, but instead use the facts as appropriate in conducting your evaluation. So what do we have to do? So client is Amberg and Lewis. You're outlining the organization is by Phoenix's argument. So I want to look at that motion. And I am preparing an objective memo evaluating the merits of Phoenix's argument for Amberg and Lewis's disqualification. And I'm told not to draft a separate statement of facts. All right, so did you guys all get that when you looked at it? Did you guys all, you can tell me, you can just type, like, did you see the significance of all of those facts that were in there? Okay, good. Good. I mean, and that's really like what I want you to pick up on is the significance of the facts, and like every fact in there is important. So the next thing that I want you to do is skim the file. So a skim is truly, you're just looking at the documents and you're trying to identify, what jumps off the page at you. In the file, you're like, when I'm skimming, I'm literally going through. I'll show you what mine looks like. So mine, I clip the first page, and I usually will write in the top corner of the first page, I'll write what it is. So I'm like, all right, here's the transcript. I did that with the task memo. I'm looking at it like I'm just going through really quickly to see what is in here. If the transcript, I'm looking to see, does anything in particular jump off the page? Does anything jump off the page? Do I see any lists of questions? Do I see things in quotes? Do I see anything numbered? And I don't. And then when I look at the next document, I see that it's, okay, I'm like, all right, here's the letter. So I know that the letter is in here. And a few things jump out at me. So when I look at the date, I would just see that it's a letter. I see that it's marked in bold, confidential. So that's a hint that whoever sees this, it's not, if you're not the person that it's addressed to, it's not for you. It's marked confidential. And then I also look at here, it's Gordon Chetnia is the president. And I note here that it's to Pete Horvitz, and it says Esquire. So it looks like a document that's privileged because it says confidential and it's to an attorney. So that's just in a quick skim. I didn't read the text of the actual letter at all. All right. And then the next document is the motion. So you have the motion, and I'm just going to, with the skim, I'm really just going to be looking at the headings to see what the motion has. And I see they have their arguments. So this is basically giving me my organizational structure. So that's what I'm going to largely use, or at least I think, and I might modify it later. And it's important that you kind of remain flexible. But this gives us an organizational structure. So I want you guys to quickly, or that's what a skim is. I basically did it, but I want you guys just to take a few minutes and do that on your own, even though I've pointed it out to you. So I'll give you guys like 3 minutes until 7:25.
All right, so now you've had a chance to skim it. I really hope that you saw the arguments in the opposing and the brief in support of the motion to disqualify counsel. One thing I want to point out, if you have to write a brief, you do not need to do the setup like this one looks. You don't need to go in and put the little like close parentheses, all of that. You just literally write at the top, defendant's brief in opposition to plaintiff's motion to disqualify counsel for defendant. So you don't need to get all complicated. Like that's not going to get you points, and it's going to take way too much time. So when you skim it, there's a few things. When I skimmed it, there were a few things that jumped out to me. And note, like I've done this PT about 100 times, but I'm looking for when I'm skimming the motion, I'm looking. Some of the things that jumped out to me are I'm looking for cites. So there's an evidence code cited here. I'm looking for rules. I'm looking for case cites. I'm just trying to get an idea of like what they're relying on. But I'm really not spending a lot of time in here. You'll get better at skimming as you practice. So that's really what you're looking for. All right. So sorry, I keep turning the camera of me on and off because I don't like it just being on and etc. All right, so you skim the file, and that, again, like this just takes a few minutes, and you'll get really fast at doing this. So these are all the things that were in there. So there's the memo, obviously. You have the transcript of the client interview. You have the letter, plaintiff's brief, and then I listed the headings out here. So this is basically what I've gathered. And then I basically, like, as I'm going and typing this, and I'll show you what mine looks like as I'm going and doing this. So just so you all can see. So this has a little bit more, but like as I read the task memo, I went in and I put memorandum to, from, date, subject. I put a quick introduction. So, you know, below, yeah, Adam, I'll answer your question. The introduction below, I said, below, please see my objective analysis evaluating the merits of Phoenix's argument for Amberger and Lewis's disqualification, bringing to bear the applicable legal authorities and the relevant facts. Then I have, point 1, introduction, point 2, an analysis. Mine has a little bit more in here, but I just started with whether Phoenix, it's objective, so I'm just saying whether. So whether Phoenix's document is protected by the attorney-client privilege, whether Amberger and Lewis violated an ethical obligation, and whether, so it's B, C, and D, whether Amberger and Lewis threatened Phoenix with incurable prejudice, and then I have my conclusion. And this is my canned conclusion that I do for memos. Thank you for allowing me to do this research for you. If you need any further assistance on this or any other matter, please let me know. So I do that, like when I have a memo, that's at the beginning, I literally, that's what I write. And this will be posted as well to the Twin page if it's not already. I'll send this over so it gets posted. So I do that setup. Adam, you asked a good question. So it doesn't seem like the file takes all that long to read, but yeah, it is good to just skim it initially because people get bogged down in the facts. You'll get bogged down in the facts, and people, you all should practice doing it different ways. So if you think that you would like to just read the file, I say go for it. Like try it one time. Usually, I don't think that's the best course of action on the actual exam. And in practice. So I think that people get bogged down in it because you don't really know what's significant until you know what all the law is. So you need to read those precedent cases to see what type of facts you're looking for. So that's why. So just get an idea of what you have in your file that way because then the cases become more significant as you read them. But just so you kind of get an idea of like, all right, I remember seeing a reference to this, and it sort of helps you read the cases a little bit more carefully. But don't spend a lot of time there because you really want to be in the file when you're writing your analysis, and you've got to pull out your rules and you got to write your case explanations before that. Does that make sense? All right. So next, next we skim the library. So this is just, again, so you're skimming the library. So what we just did with the facts, I want you to skim the library. You're looking, when I skim, I'm just looking to see when I see this, I want you to see what, and what jumps off the page. What jumps off the page, and you want to identify what is the precedential value of what you have. And then you're looking for really like you read for a case, you read the first line of each paragraph and I label it. So I'll show you guys what mine looks like. Adam, you asked where I developed my headings. I pulled those from the opposing party's motion. So I literally, like I say, I read the first line, and just the line, not the whole sentence. I just read the first line to get an idea. Is this facts? Is this an issue? Is this a rule? What is it? And I label it. So that I'm like trying to sort of dissect the cases so that I can like pull them apart and identify the relevant portions of them. So I want you guys to go ahead and do that. I'm going to give you I'll check in with you guys in about 10 minutes. So go ahead and do that for this. Don't get bogged down. Like, I don't want you reading everything right now. So just identify where it is. And especially like, especially don't get into the facts, but get into the, you can get into the analysis a little bit, but you just want to skim to see what do you have. So just like in the real world, you address whatever they did. Yes, exactly. You address what they did because and the instructions from the task memo tell you to evaluate their arguments so that you get their arguments from the brief. So you're addressing each argument in turn. Okay. All right. So it's 7:31. So I'm going to give you guys until 7:45 to do this, to go through and skim. And well, I actually want you to, because the next stage is to read the library. So I want you to do a quick skim and then I want you to read it. So I'll give you guys until 7:45 to do that. All right. So you guys should have had enough time. Does anybody need more time to read? To go through the library. Sorry. So you skimmed the library and then went through and read it. Um, so when you skimmed it, you should have seen that there was a statute, and then a statute in two cases. And then when you read the cases and the statute, so the statute is short. Generally speaking, if you just have one statute, that means that statute's going to be important, and you should definitely spend some time there. So here you just have the one statute, and then you have the two cases. So when you went through the statute, what did you guys, what did you notice? So these are all the things that I have. So I want you guys to see if all these things popped out to you. So there is a comment that refers to the cases that we have, both Luna and Mead. And in Indigo v. Luna, it says the issue is whether the trial court abused its discretion by disqualifying plaintiff's attorney for improper use of attorney-client privilege documents. So this goes directly to the this goes straight to those points that were brought up in the brief by the opposing side. So I have the two cases. So I have Indigo v. Luna, and I have Mead v. Conley, which goes to incurable prejudice. So that's really what I noticed. And then I'm determining the organizational setup. So here, so we have the and this is, I'm skipping around a little bit here because I talked about this earlier. Based on the task memo, I outlined based on the task memo, and then looking at the opposing party's brief or their motion, their DQ motion, we could identify, and like Adam, this is a question that you asked, I identified what the main point headings were. So is it protected by the attorney-client privilege? Has Amberg and Lewis violated an ethical obligation? And has Amberg and Lewis threatened Phoenix with incurable prejudice? So that's my organizational setup. Those are the main point headings under the analysis section. So we've read the library. And in this case, so the reason I pick this particular performance test is because, and let me see, there's a question here. Okay, good. So in this particular performance test, what's really important here, one really important thing to note, is you have the statute, and the statute directly overrules part of what's in the cases, and so it overrules something. So that's really important. You have to look at the precedential value with the statute here. The statute was written by the Supreme Court. So it was adopted by the Franklin Supreme Court. So that's really important in terms of precedential value. It discusses the cases, so it shows that it came after those other two cases. And it elaborates on this particular rule. So this rule is very important, the statute. So there's that. So the dates in the courts matter. They reveal what's governing law, what's just persuasive. You will often get persuasive authority, not binding authority. So you always need to, when you do get that, you need to point that out. If there's only cases, then the law is going to come from the cases. If there are cases and statutes, then you want to focus on the statutes that are discussed in the cases. And then if you just have one statute, that statute is going to be important. Oftentimes you'll be given, 4, 5, 6, 7 statutes. And when you have that, the thing to know is that, don't dig into the statutes. You just go to the cases and see what statutes do the cases discuss. That's part of where reading everything can be harmful, because if you're reading everything and if you're looking, you're trying to analyze everything, it will be, if you're trying to analyze and break down all those statutes, you could spend 90 minutes doing just that and it won't be enough time. So when that happens, then you just focus on the statutes that are discussed in the cases, and ignore my notes here because that was from something else. My notes that are, if you guys, I think you can see my notes that I have to myself. So, all right. So you already read the library. And then we want to, so draft the rules in the case explanation. So did you guys all identify the pertinent rules? Did you identify the pertinent rules as you were going through it? Tell me yes or no, because if you didn't, then I'm gonna, then I want to give you guys a little bit of time to do that. Okay, so you identified them. So then, good. So now what I want you to do is have you guys all I want you guys to start drafting. Yeah, they do spell it out fairly well. And most of the time they will, but most of the time everything will be spelled out very well. However, this is important. You don't want to pull the particular rule regarding what the attorney's ethical obligation from the cases, because you have to pull it from the statute. So it's a mistake because the ethical obligation is overruled by the Supreme Court by adopting the statute. And so opposing counsel relies on this old rule rather than the current rule. So you have to be really careful. So what you want to do is you want to draft rules. So I want you guys to practice doing this. So I'll show you mine. So all right. So notice of receipt. So whether Amberg and Lewis violated an ethical obligation. So I have mine here, but I want you guys to draft what the current rule is and pull it from the statute, not from the cases. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of minutes to do that, like actually draft it, and then that way you can compare. And then I'm going to have you draft a case explanation showing how it. Yeah. All right. So I'll give you. Did you already type that out or not? Okay, so I want to give you guys, I'll give you guys a few minutes. So I want you to like prep your memo. I want you to actually type it so that it looks sort of like mine. To, from, date, subject, introduction, analysis, and put in your point heading. So I want you guys to do that. And then let's see. Yeah, so I just want you to pull out some of the rules. I have another one where it's more complete. This is like one stage of production of this particular PT. So set it up, and then, I can leave mine so you can look at it, but just like I'll leave it so you can see the top. And then I want you to plug in some of the rules, just the rule, it's the statute of what the ethical obligation is. So we'll do that. I'll give you guys just like 8 minutes, so till 8 o'clock. Oops, I'll leave this up on the screen. All right. So did you guys all have time to kind of put that together? Pull some of your rules, like start to get together the skeletal outline of like what your PT is going to really look like? Okay, good. Am I giving you guys all way too much time on everything? You can tell me if I am. Okay, good. Thanks, Lori. Um, if you need more time, always tell me. But yeah. All right. Cool. So, um, the really important thing here with this particular statute is that it overrules the case that the attorneys rely on. I'll tell you, like, big hint, that the attorneys rely on the wrong law. And you don't rely on Indigo v. Luna. You don't rely on that rule in terms of setting what the standard is. All right. So next step, let's go back to my PowerPoint. So you're matching the rule to sub rules, and then let's see. And then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to draft some case explanations. So I will actually, let me just show you my rule, which I read to you prior. But so like here, actually, I will show you guys what a slightly more complete one looks like. Give me 1 second. Sorry. Okay, so here is a sample of what I have this particular PD broken down in the different stages of when I was writing it. So these are the rules. So whether Amberg and Lewis violated an ethical obligation. So this is the rule that I have here that I pulled from Rule 4.4. And then here's my rule. So the rules that I have, whether Amberg and Lewis has threatened Phoenix with incurable prejudice. I have the rule there, and I have there are the 6 different factors. So I have all of those listed out, which I do end up changing later. Like I actually don't end up having a heading for each of those, but I just like to show you guys where I was at this particular phase. So when I had plugged in all of my rules, it looked like this. So I had the memo, I had the introduction, my analysis, I have my headings, which was modified a little bit, whether it's protected by the attorney-client privilege. That's kind of a preliminary issue. So that's actually a really easy one. And I got that rule, just so you guys know, that's not in the library, but I got that from the motion, from the opposing party's motion. Whether Amberg and Lewis, so whether A&L violated an ethical obligation, incurable prejudice, and that's it. So does yours look something like this so far? Granted, I can't even tell you how many performance tests. So I've done a lot of these. So if mine looks better, like don't take that as any sort of indication that you're not doing well. You guys it's all a work in progress. And if yours looks like mine, that's fantastic. All right, so the next thing then is to draft case explanations. So what the purpose of doing this is, I'll turn the camera on so you can feel like someone's talking to you. The purpose of drafting case explanations is so that you can show how a rule works in operation. So you can say, okay, well, this is how this particular rule works. Something is protected by the attorney-client privilege when you can show how it, when there is a letter, a technical document that conveyed it was a communication from an attorney to a client that conveyed that conveyed an attorney's thoughts or impressions of a case, or it conveyed case strategies. So stuff like that. So it's not a case-by-case summary. You're showing, with the facts and the law, how a court has applied a particular law to that case, so how it works. And then what you're doing is you're setting it up so that you can analogize or distinguish from that precedent case. So the different things that it includes. You're illustrating how a rule works. So this is different from, you're not just stating a rule. This is how a rule works in operation. So you include the key holding, the case reasoning. Sometimes you might include policy. It's ideal if you have multiple cases that do this, then that's great. Often you're not really going to have time for that. Like a really advanced writer would do that, but like you're not, I don't want you guys to think that that's something that you have to do. If you are able, though, if you have multiple cases and you can see easily how the same rule is interpreted, or if you have like 2 different cases where they come to a different conclusion on each, and you need to show why one court's interpretation is what applies, then you'll do that. And I call case explanations rule proofs. I use those terms interchangeably. So a case explanation, it's not a case-by-case summary. It refers only to the precedent case's facts. It does not refer to yours. It shows how the rule works, and it's just literally showing how the court applied a rule to on a narrow issue. So it's not the entire thing. It's not showing how how it all broke down. It's just on a particular thing. So we'll see how this works. So let's see. So here's the formulas. I like formulas. So I have in case name, and then you insert the key facts. The court held, and you insert the holding. Reasoning, and you insert the reasoning. So this is okay, so it's on the slide, but it actually is pretty brief when it's written into a PT. So here's an example of one. This is from the July 2017 performance test. So the answer that I wrote. So in United States v. Clark, a customs agent boarded a ship that had returned to its home port, proceeded directly to the cabin assigned to defendant, and after knocking and being admitted by defendant's roommate, entered defendant's cabin and proceeded to search through defendant's belongings without either a warrant or permission from defendant. The court held that the search in question was non-routine and therefore required a reasonable suspicion of wrongdoing, reasoning that the cabin was defendant's de facto home in which defendant had a reasonable expectation of privacy. So this literally just follows that formula. It's the case name, it's the key facts just on whether something was a routine search or a non-routine search. So it's not saying what the court held overall, it's just telling what happened on this particular narrow issue. It tells you what the court held, and it tells you what the reasoning was. So it's short, it's a few sentences. My sentences are a little bit long, but that's okay. So this is the same thing. It's just, this is a slightly different formula, and this is just a rearrangement of how, it's just a rearrangement of it. So you can do it different ways. So I'll let you guys sort of figure out what you like, but this literally says the same thing, just in a slightly different order. So it's not super long. So I want you guys to practice. So let's see which one I want you to do it with. What issue? So give me 1 second. Okay. Sorry, it has my watermark on it. Okay. So I want you to do it on something simple. I want you to practice it for, so the first rule is where the Shetnia letter is protected by the attorney-client privilege. So a communication between a client and an attorney is privileged, right? So that's a simple rule. And I want you, so what you can do, even though the courts don't actually explicitly analyze this, based on the reading of the case, you can see, in Indigo, the court did find that was a privileged document. So based on what facts? So I want you guys to take, or here, I can show you mine. So based on that, so on this one, I have that the court found that the attorney-client privilege attached to a technical evidence document drafted by Luna's attorney because it was a communication memorializing a conference between the attorney and a high-ranking Luna executive, stamped attorney-client privileged, and it discussed the strengths and weaknesses of Luna's technical evidence. So it's a communication between an attorney-client, an attorney and a client. So that's pretty simple. So let's see. Okay. So what I actually want you guys to draft is the whether incurable prejudice requires disqualification. So the case that actually discusses that is Mead. And so what I want you to do is so the rule there is what I have up here. So a court must consider whether a party faces incurable prejudice if an attorney or law firm is not disqualified. The facts and circumstances surrounding the case in the following 6 factors. And so I list all the factors. So what I want you to do is draft a case explanation saying, okay, so what did the court hold in Mead? Was disqualification appropriate? So, and how do they come out on on these different factors? So You can see mine here is, this is mine here, and I'm going to put it away in a second so that you guys can't, actually, I'm going to put it away now. So I want you guys to draft a case explanation. So I'll put the formulas back up on, here's a formula. And I want you guys to draft a case explanation for that issue in this case. Does that make sense? Do you guys all know what you're supposed to do? Okay, good. So I'm going to give you a little bit more time here. I'm going to give you like 15 minutes to do this. So at 8:25, well, then we'll reconvene. All right. So how was drafting that? Is it hard? I think you guys can turn your microphones on and you can tell me. Because I have not turned them off. Are you guys all zoned out? Are you still there? Okay, good, good. So did you guys draft it? Do you still need more time? Because I'll put mine up to show you what mine look like. Okay, cool. Perfect. All right, so here's mine. So I said in Mead, where an attorney Mead received documents belonging to opposing party, Conley, the court held the attorney's knowledge that the attorney-client privilege protected the letter. So now I'm getting into the factors. Failure to notify the opposing party that it received the letter and thorough review of the letter weighed in favor of disqualification. However, the court held that the documents contained little more than a paraphrase of allegations which would not prejudice its client. The court could prevent prejudice by excluding use of the documents. And if the party who obtained the documents was disqualified, it would significantly prejudice Mead because Mead's, yeah, it would significantly prejudice Mead's. It should be Mead's client, is who I'm referring to there. Because disqualification close to trial when the firm had determined trial strategy, worked extensively on trial preparation, and readied the matter for trial would confer an enormous and an unmerited strategic advantage upon Conley. So is yours something, how are your guys's? So I realize, like, mine has been revised. Like, I definitely say that. Mine has been, edited. But how do your guys's compare? Do you, like, kind of hit the same points? Like, and note how I did this. So initially when I organized this, I had a heading for each factor, and then I just realized that I wouldn't have enough time to write the entire thing and do a little mini IRAC under each heading. So what I did is I just did a summary of the some factors weighed in favor of DQ and others didn't, and ultimately the court decided not to disqualify, and the reason why. So do you guys hit those points in your rule proof or in your case explanations? Sort of. I'm gonna just assume yes. Okay, good, good. Thanks, Lori. Yeah, I mean, it's close, right? You might get something like mine. Mine look like I'm. That what I care about is that you basically you like focused on how what the court decided on those issues and why. Like, did you have a case name? Did you say what happened factually so that you can make a comparison? And that's really what I care about. So mine is like I've written this PT several times and honed it. So that's case explanations. So you've done that, and then you go through. So we're not going to have enough time to go through to go through and read the file for the facts, but I want to go through and talk about so you're not, yeah. So somebody asked. So Adam asked, should we plan to summarize each case in writing? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. So you don't necessarily need to do that. It's really like in some instances where there's a lot of analysis of a particular thing, like here, you will. So I will post my answer that I wrote for this PT so that you guys can see that. So I will provide that. I'm happy to. So because I want you guys to actually write this, and then you can have and it will be given if you guys submit this particular PT. You can submit it for grading to TJ. So I want to just kind of go over the general structure, and this is what we've been working on. Is how it looks, and I'll show you. I can actually go through and label mine as well, just so that you guys can see that. So first we have the issue, and then we have the rule. So you have an issue heading, and then I have the rule, which is what you guys drafted, and then you have a case explanation. Then you have your analysis, where you're analogizing or distinguishing from the precedent case, or else you're just like or else you're just applying the law to the facts. So like in this particular PT, you don't have a case explanation for whether they violated an ethical obligation because no cases address the current rule. So here I have the I start with the conclusion. So I have my heading here. So whether Amberg and Lewis violated an ethical obligation, I can zoom. Can you guys read it? So I have, whether they violate an ethical obligation. Thanks, Lori. Then I have the rules here, and then I just have my analysis. So whether they violated an ethical obligation. So that's my analysis. So it's issue heading, and then I start with the conclusion. You don't have to. Then I just state the rule. Here I just state the analysis. I include a counter argument, although Phoenix contends. I include a counter argument, and then I have a conclusion. The next one, so one where the structure is like IRRAC. So IRAC with the case explanation. So I start with the conclusion. I have the rule. So I have the heading, start with the conclusion, and then I have a rule, which is a long rule here. When I scroll down, I have the case explanation, like we just talked about, and then I'm analogizing to Mead. So there's an analysis paragraph, an analysis paragraph. I have an analysis of the factors that weigh in favor and ones that weigh against. And then I have a counter argument. So I'll post all of this, but I just wanted to give you guys, I wanted to go over and give you guys a summary, and I want to talk about the structure a little bit more generally now. So right now, because we've been focusing on is extracting and doing a bit of writing. So this is, you basically have in your analysis, you're going to have an issue, you're going to have a rule below that. Where necessary, you have a case explanation. You always have analysis. You will usually, or you will often have a counter argument. You'll have about 2 of these per performance test, and then you have a conclusion. And it's just like an essay where you have both, big IRACs and sub IRACs. So you're going to have, the whole entire performance test is one big IRAC, and then there's sub IRACs in between for each little sub issue. So this, I include this in here so you guys can go back, because it's posted, so that you guys can go back and go through it. But we've gone through these pieces, but in case you need to reference anything, this is in here. So it just tells you the different components. So, one last kind of thing, that I want to talk about is self-assessment. I'll turn the camera on so I can kind of talk to you guys a little bit more. So self-assessment with the PTs, it's really important. Like I said, the performance test is important because it's really important because you can get so much from it. You can get so much score-wise. So this can really carry you. Likewise, it can also be a big burden. But I really strongly believe that every single person can really get a 65 or above, because you guys all can practice this skill. You can develop the skill necessary to pass the performance test. Everybody can do that. And the thing that I remember when I took the bar exam was after, I don't remember if it was day 1 or day 3, but somebody nearby said out loud, they're like, I just don't get performance tests. I just don't understand it. And I was just I felt for that person, because that's just so unnecessary. I mean, it's really on that person, because that means they just didn't practice. But if you're feeling like that, that's something that we can resolve. It's something that you can just work on, and you can just do lots of practice. So when you're going through, so Adam, so you asked if it's worth double, is it worth doing it first? I talked about this earlier, but I still don't think that it's worth doing it first, because I don't want you to eat into any time from the other stuff. You have to be able to allocate your time. And if you do it first, if you switch it around, it's you're likely going to eat into your time for your essays, which means that you're screwing yourself on your essays. And I don't recommend that, obviously, but that's why I don't like switching around the order of things. So when you self-assess, you want to look, you want to look at all of these things. So number one, when I talk about self-assessment, and this is true for the essays as well, you want to say, okay, did I get the issues? Did I get the issues? And, I list organization first, but really it's, did I hit the issues? Did I know my rules? Did I analyze it well? And then you look at the organization, because, you might do the best job in the world of analyzing something, but if the reader can't find it because it's poorly organized, then, you're not going to get the points for it. But priority number 1 is issue spotting. Priority number 2 is doing a solid analysis and recognizing ambiguities. So did you raise, did you discuss counter arguments? You absolutely need to do that here. You need to point out in a performance test if an opposing side made an argument, like why are they wrong? In this particular one, if you read the whole file, you'll see that the opposing side relies on Indigo v. Luna for the rule for what the ethical obligation is, and that's just flat wrong. So you need to explain that. You need to explain that. And again, you're still doing this in an objective manner. This is still an objective performance test. It's not persuasive. So you have to, watch your tone, because it can be hard when you believe really strongly in something. But really, you always want to check your tone. Rule recitation, did you include the entire relevant text of the key rules? If you missed something, why? Like if you missed an issue, why did you miss that issue? It's really important for you to spend time assessing. So you've got to go through and you've got to spend that time. And if you don't feel the reason self-assessment is really important is because it's immediate feedback. So if you can self-assess really well, that's fantastic. And you need to be doing this even if you're submitting it to somebody else for grading. So make sure that you are doing that. But also know that you can always, pop in, see Professor Matsumoto, see Professor Israel and Professor Berger. All right. So analysis and fact use. Did you extract the relevant facts from the file? And if you didn't, what did you do differently and why? So you have to think about your thought process. And this is why it's important to do this right afterwards. So what happened when you were thinking about it? What was your thought process? Did you think that a fact was not relevant and it really was? Okay, well then why did you think that? And you need to make corrections. Did you draft analogical reasoning? So I'll post mine so you can see samples of it. Because I want you guys to see that. So I will definitely post that. So analysis and fact use. All right, now we have a little bit of time. Do you guys have any questions? So let me read this question that was posted. The lunch conversation is noticed to opposing. Yes, Adam. Yeah. I do think that you will make that argument. Yes. Does anybody have any questions about PTs generally, about the bars, the study process, anything else? And you guys all know that I'm not at the school anymore, so I think you guys got that email, but just in case. I know. Sad face. But I'm still available throughout the bar cycle for these workshops. I'm just not available to if you guys ask me a question and I can forward it along. I just don't know what my obligations are just intense, so I just don't want to leave you guys hanging. That's all. But I wanted to do the workshops, or else I don't think they would have happened. All right. Well, if you guys think of any questions related to the PT, thanks, Melissa. If you guys think of any questions related to the PTs, I will post this. We'll make a Dropbox so that you can submit this particular performance test for grading. So it'll be posted to Twen, and you should, So I'm going to send an email over, make sure that that gets set up and taken care of, and then I have the next. All of the workshops are on the Twen calendar. So they're all on there. If you for the ones that are coming up largely are all substantive. So that's where I'm going to be going over some multiple choice problems and a few essays, and we will release those in the days leading up to the. I don't like to post all of them early because people do them early. So instead I will post them about 2 days before we're going to do the workshop. So I want you guys to write the essays and then review it, and then also the multiple choice problems. The multiple choice problems, I'm going to be reviewing the first 10 problems in the BARB resets that are posted to Twen. So, but emails about that will be sent out. Somebody asked if TJ will host a midterm mock bar. Yeah, there will be a mock bar. That is being put together. I don't know that we had selected a weekend before I left or not, so I will talk to them and make sure that gets added to the calendar. But it'll probably, my guess is it'll be one the first weekend in February, right around there. All right, thanks so much. Thanks, Adam. I appreciate that. All right. yeah, let me know if anything else comes up, guys, and or else I'll see you on Sunday. Have a good night. Bye.